Instructor Krelva had studied every Deathworld species, but one human cadet made him rewrite his entire curriculum in a single afternoon. My name is Krelva, and before you ask, yes, I am exactly as tired as I sound. I teach advanced threat assessment and Deathworld species protocol at the finest military academy in the Andromeda sector, which sounds impressive until you realize that 90% of my job involves explaining to spoiled aristocrat spawn why they should not, under any circumstances, attempt to arm wrestle a Kravik or challenge a Sorn to a breathing contest. The pay is adequate, the benefits are mediocre, the students are insufferable. Tuesday morning, Galactic Standard Time, I walked into Lecture Hall 7 with my 4th cup of stimulant brew and a presentation I had given so many times I could recite it in my sleep. Deathworld Species Protocol, Chapter 4, Subsection Earth. Again, the Academy insisted on covering it every semester, even though humans were rare in our sector and most cadets would never encounter one in their entire career. The class was already seated, 32 cadets from 11 different species, all wearing their dress uniforms and their best expressions of profound boredom. I recognized most of them. The Yulven twins in the back row who thought tactical analysis was beneath them. Cora the Matharian, who kept checking her datapad every 15 seconds. And right there in the 3rd row, taking up more space than strictly necessary, was Venix. Oh, Venix, where do I even start? He was Thraxian, which meant he stood nearly 8 feet tall with 4 arms and exoskeletal plating that could deflect small arms fire. His species had conquered 14 star systems before joining the Galactic Coalition, and he made absolutely certain everyone knew it. Every single day, he sat there with 2 arms crossed over his chest, and the other 2 draped casually over the seats beside him, his mandibles clicking in what I had learned to recognize as smug anticipation. Thraxians loved the Earth lecture. It gave them an opportunity to feel superior about something. I activated the holo display and pulled up my notes, which I had not actually looked at in 3 years, and scanned the room one final time. That was when I noticed her. Seated in the 2nd row almost directly in front of my podium was a cadet I did not immediately recognize. She was small, absurdly small by galactic standards, barely 5.5 feet tall, with a slight frame that made her look like a strong breeze might knock her over. Her skin was a light tan color, her hair dark and pulled back into a practical knot, and her eyes were a brownish hazel that tracked my movement with polite attention. She wore a standard-issue Coalition cadet uniform that looked about half a size too large for her. I checked my roster. Petra Kovac, exchange student, species designation human, origin world, Earth. Well, that was going to make this lecture interesting. I had taught exactly 3 humans in my entire career. One of them had been perfectly pleasant and unremarkable. The other 2 had gotten themselves expelled for reasons that were classified at a level significantly above my security clearance, which told me everything I needed to know about how that had gone. Petra, for her part, looked completely unbothered by the fact that she was about to sit through a lecture analyzing her own species like a laboratory specimen. She had a datapad open on her desk, a stylus in her hand, and the expression of someone who was genuinely planning to take notes. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. All right, settle down, I said, though nobody had been talking. Today we continue our survey of restricted category species with a focus on Sol-3, commonly designated Earth. I know most of you find this topic amusing, but I assure you the Galactic Coalition does not classify species as restricted for entertainment purposes. Venix made a sound that was probably supposed to be a cough, but sounded more like grinding rocks. Several other cadets snickered. I saw Petra's jaw tighten slightly, but she did not look up from her datapad. The human species, I continued, pulling up an image of Earth on the holo display, originates from a Class 4 Deathworld, with environmental conditions that are, by any reasonable standard, absurdly hostile to complex life. Gravity is 1.0 standard, which some of you may find tolerable until you spend more than 6 hours in it and realize your spine is compressing. Atmospheric oxygen content is 21%, which is borderline toxic to most species and causes accelerated cellular degradation over time. I clicked to the next slide, which showed various Earth predators. The planet hosts approximately 87 apex predator species, 16 of which are capable of killing an adult human. Humans, naturally, decided the appropriate response to this was persistence hunting, which is exactly as insane as it sounds. Venix raised one of his 4 hands. Instructor Krelva, if I may, I find it difficult to believe such a fragile-looking species could pose any legitimate threat. I mean, look at them. He gestured with his lower left arm toward Petra, who still had not looked up. No offense intended, of course. Petra's stylus stopped moving. She glanced up at Venix with an expression of such profound disinterest that it actually made me smile. "None taken," she said quietly, and went back to her notes. I took another long drink of my stimulant brew and pulled up the next slide, which detailed Earth's atmospheric composition in excruciating detail. This was the part of the lecture where I usually lost half the class to their datapads, and today was no exception. Earth's atmosphere contains nitrogen, oxygen, argon, carbon dioxide, and trace amounts of several other gases that will give most of you a migraine if you breathe them for extended periods, I droned, reading directly from the slide because I genuinely could not be bothered to paraphrase anymore. The planet experiences what humans call seasons, which are essentially prolonged periods where the environment actively attempts to kill you in different ways. Winter brings sub-freezing temperatures and precipitation in solid form. Summer brings heat indices that can cause system failure in unshielded technology. Cora raised her hand without looking up from her datapad. "Instructor, is there a practical reason we need to memorize this? I mean, humans are restricted from frontline combat positions anyway, correct?" "Correct," I said. "They are also restricted from solo deep space assignments, diplomatic protection details, and any position that involves guarding high-value assets. The Coalition determined approximately 40 years ago that humans are, quote, tactically unpredictable and prone to improvisation that borders on suicidal, unquote." That got a few laughs. I noticed Petra's stylus had stopped moving again, but her expression remained carefully neutral. She was good at that, I had to admit. Most species would have shown some kind of defensive reaction by now. Humans apparently just took notes and waited for you to finish insulting them. I clicked to the next slide, which showed a comparison chart of human physical capabilities versus galactic averages. Now here is where it gets interesting. And by interesting I mean baffling. Humans have a baseline endurance capacity that exceeds most species by a factor of 3 to 1. Their cardiovascular systems are overbuilt for their body mass. Their skeletal structure is reinforced with a mineral density that approaches light combat plating, and their healing factor is frankly absurd. Venix leaned back in his seat, all four arms now crossed. "With all due respect, instructor, those still seem exaggerated. I have seen the human cadet in our tactical drills. She is competent, certainly, but hardly exceptional." Several other cadets murmured agreement. I saw the Yilvin twins nodding in the back row. Petra finally looked up from her datapad, met Venix's gaze for exactly 2 seconds, and then looked back down. She had not said a single word, but somehow the silence felt louder than any argument she could have made. I sighed and pulled up a video file. "Let me show you something that might adjust your perspective. This is footage from the human homeworld, specifically from what they call a sporting event." The holo display flickered to life, showing a group of humans running across an open field while other humans chased them and physically tackled them to the ground, repeatedly, with enthusiasm that bordered on violence. "This is called rugby," I said. "Humans play this recreationally, for fun, without armor." The class watched in silence as a human male was tackled by 3 other humans, hit the ground hard enough that I winced, and then got back up and kept running. The Yilvin twins had stopped whispering. Cora had actually looked up from her datapad. "That looks like it should cause serious injury," one of the cadets said. "It does," Petra said quietly, not looking up. "Concussions, broken bones, torn ligaments. Pretty standard." Venix made that grinding rock sound again. "And you consider this entertainment?" "I consider it Tuesday afternoon at school," Petra replied, her tone so mild it took everyone a second to process what she had actually said. I paused the video and looked at her. "Cadet Kovac, are you telling me that human children engage in full-contact combat sports as part of standard education?" "Not all schools," she said, flipping a page on her datapad. "Some schools do football instead, or ice hockey. That one is played on frozen water while wearing bladed footwear, so it is probably more dangerous if we are being honest about it." The classroom had gone very quiet. I stood there, holding my stylus, trying to figure out if she was joking. Her expression suggested she was not joking. Her expression suggested that she had just described something so normal to her that she genuinely did not understand why we were all staring. Venix uncrossed all 4 of his arms. "Humans strap blades to their feet and fight on ice? Well, we do not call it fighting," Petra said. "We call it checking. But yes, essentially." I deleted the rest of my lecture notes and decided we were moving directly to the practical demonstration. I closed my datapad with more force than strictly necessary and gestured toward the door. Alright, clearly we need a more hands-on approach here. Everyone up. We are moving to Combat Simulation Chamber 3. The cadets exchanged glances, which was their universal signal for confusion mixed with mild concern. We did not usually do practical exercises during theory lectures, but I was improvising now, and frankly I wanted to see what happened when we put the human cadet through a standard reaction drill, for science, and maybe a little bit because Venix was getting on my last nerve. The simulation chamber was a short walk down a corridor, a large rectangular space with walls made of impact-resistant composite and a ceiling high enough to accommodate even the tallest species. The floor was marked with a grid pattern in glowing blue lines, and along one wall stood a rack of training equipment including the plasma simulation weapons we used for reaction testing. I pulled up the control panel and started initializing the system while the cadets filed in and spread out along the observation area. Petra entered last, her hands clasped behind her back, looking around the chamber with what I was starting to recognize as her default expression of polite interest. The reaction test is simple, I announced, picking up one of the plasma training rifles from the rack. This weapon fires a low-energy plasma bolt that will sting if it hits you, but will not cause permanent damage. The simulation system tracks your reaction time from the moment the weapon reaches firing threshold to the moment you successfully evade or intercept the shot. Most species average between 0.4 and 0.7 seconds. Anything under 0.3 is considered exceptional. I handed the rifle to my teaching assistant, a Vorlian named Tex, who had been standing quietly in the corner. Tex was perfect for this job because he had exactly zero personality and followed instructions with mechanical precision. Cadet Cora, you are up first, I said. Cora stepped into the firing zone, her stance wide and her center of gravity low like they taught in basic training. Tex raised the weapon. The targeting system beeped 3 times to indicate it was ready, and then fired. The plasma bolt streaked across the chamber in a flash of blue-white light. Cora dove left, hit the floor, rolled, and came up in a defensive crouch. 0.58 seconds, I read from the display panel. Adequate. Next. We cycled through 8 more cadets. The Yilvan twins both clocked in at 0.52 seconds, moving in perfect synchronization like they did everything. A Relian cadet named Horks managed 0.46 by dropping flat on his back the instant the weapon charged. Decent scores. All of them. Exactly what you would expect from students who had been training for this their entire lives. Then Venix stepped forward, all 4 arms flexing in what I assumed was his species equivalent of cracking knuckles. Allow me to demonstrate proper form, he announced, his mandibles clicking with satisfaction. He strode into the firing zone like he owned it, which was typical Venix behavior, and settled into a combat stance that was actually quite good. His primary arms were positioned for a high guard while his secondary arms stayed low for balance. Tex raised the rifle. The targeting system beeped. The weapon fired. Venix moved fast. I had to give him that. His upper right arm came across his body in a sweeping block, striking the plasma bolt mid-flight and deflecting it into the ceiling where it dissipated harmlessly. His exoskeletal plating absorbed the impact without visible damage. 0.29 seconds, I announced. The class actually applauded. Venix executed a small bow, clearly enjoying himself. As you can see, he said, turning to address the other cadets like he was the one teaching this class. Proper technique combined with superior physiology yields optimal results. Species advantage is a fundamental reality of combat. Oh, he was really pushing it now. I looked at Petra, who had not moved from her position against the wall. Cadet Kovac, you are up. She blinked at me. Me? Yes, you. Let us see how humans perform in standardized reaction testing. She hesitated, which was the first time I had seen her show anything resembling reluctance, and then walked slowly into the firing zone. Her movements were economical, nothing wasted, and she positioned herself with her feet shoulder-width apart and her weight slightly forward. Standard human military posture, from what I remembered. Venix crossed all 4 arms again. This should be educational, he muttered just loud enough for everyone in here. Petra ignored him. She closed her eyes for a moment, took a deep breath and then opened them again. Her expression had shifted into something I could not quite read. Focus, maybe. Or calculation. Ready when you are, instructor, she said quietly. I nodded to Tex. He raised the plasma rifle. The targeting laser painted a small red dot on Petra's chest, and the charging system began its 3-tone sequence. Beep. Petra's stance did not change. Beep. Her eyes tracked the weapon with unnerving precision. Beep. Tex fired. What happened next took approximately 1.3 seconds in real time, but I swear to every deity in the known galaxy it felt like I was watching it in slow motion. The plasma bolt erupted from the rifle in a brilliant streak of superheated energy, crossing the 15-meter distance in a fraction of a heartbeat. Standard operating procedure. Completely routine. I had seen this exact drill performed hundreds of times. Except the targeting system screamed an error warning. The plasma bolt glowed significantly brighter than it should have, and I realized with a spike of cold horror that the weapon had somehow malfunctioned and fired at full lethal capacity. Petra's hand came up, her right arm extending in a smooth arc, and she caught the plasma bolt in her bare palm. She caught it with her hand. The energy discharge crackled around her fingers, blue-white lightning arcing between her knuckles, and then she squeezed and the bolt compressed into a tiny sphere of light that flickered once and died. Every single cadet in that room went silent. The silence that followed was not the normal kind of quiet you get when a class is paying attention. This was the suffocating, airless silence of 32 sentient beings simultaneously trying to process something their brains insisted could not have just happened. Petra stood in the center of the firing zone, her right hand still extended, wisps of dissipating energy curling around her fingers like smoke. She looked down at her palm, flexed her fingers once, twice, and then glanced up at me with an expression of mild concern. She said, "I think your equipment might need maintenance." I could not move. My primary and secondary nervous systems had apparently agreed to take a break from operating my body, leaving me standing there like a decorative statue. Somewhere in the distant background an alarm was beeping, which meant the safety system had registered the weapon's malfunction, which meant I was not hallucinating, which meant a human cadet had just caught a lethal plasma discharge with her bare hand like someone catching a ball. Tex dropped the rifle. It clattered on the floor with a sound that seemed obscenely loud in the silence. "Medical scan," I finally managed to croak. "Now, somebody run a medical scan on Cadet Kovac immediately." One of the Yilvan twins scrambled for the wall-mounted scanner, her hands shaking so badly it took her 3 tries to activate it. The device hummed to life, projected a grid of green light over Petra's body, and began cycling through diagnostic readings while the rest of us stood there and stared. Petra looked at her hand again, rotated her wrist, and shrugged. "I feel fine, instructor." It was more of a static shock than anything serious. "Static shock," I repeated, my voice climbing approximately 2 octaves higher than normal. "That was a full-power plasma discharge. That should have vaporized your hand, traveled up your arm, and stopped your cardiovascular system. You should be dead right now. You should be extremely, catastrophically dead." "Oh." Petra considered this. "Well, I am not, so that is good news." Venix had gone completely still, all 4 of his arms frozen in whatever position they had been in when his brain stopped working. His mandibles hung open. I had never seen a Thraxian look genuinely shocked before, and I had to admit it was oddly satisfying. "How?" he whispered. "How is that possible?" The medical scanner beeped, signaling completion, and the Yovan twin read the results in a voice that kept cracking. "Bone density is, reading at 4.7 times galactic standard. Muscle fiber composition shows a fast twitch to slow twitch ratio of 65 to 35, which is impossible according to normal biology. Neural conductivity is registering at, wait, this cannot be right." She tapped the scanner screen. "Neural response time is 0.08 seconds. "Let me see that," I said, crossing the room in 4 strides and grabbing the scanner from her hands. The data was there in clinical detail. Bone density that exceeded most light combat armor. Muscle composition that suggested Petra could probably sprint for an hour without breaking hard, then immediately engage in close quarters combat, and neural response time that was faster than our targeting computers. I looked at Petra. She looked back at me. She had not moved from the firing zone. "Cadet Kovacs," I said slowly. "That plasma bolt was traveling at approximately 1,200 meters per second. You tracked it, calculated an intercept trajectory, moved your hand into position and caught it, in less than 1/10 of a second." "Yes, instructor," she said. "How?" She tilted her head slightly, the way people do when they are being asked to explain something incredibly obvious. "Reflex training? We did a lot of dodgeball in school. This was slower than dodgeball." "Dodgeball," Venix said faintly. "It is a game where people throw balls at each other as hard as they can and you have to avoid getting hit," Petra explained helpfully. "Or catch the ball, which eliminates the thrower. Pretty standard physical education activity for ages 6 through 14. I pulled up a chair. Not because I wanted to sit down, but because I legitimately thought I might fall down. You are telling me that human children play a game that involves projectiles moving at speeds comparable to weapons fire. I mean, dodgeballs do not move quite this fast, Petra said. But some of the kids in my class had really good throwing arms. Tommy Fang could nail you from across the gymnasium. You learned to watch the wind up and move preemptively or you were going to have a bad time. Cora raised her hand like we were still in a normal lecture. Excuse me, but what happens if you do not successfully dodge or catch? You get hit with the ball, Petra said. It hurts. Sometimes you get bruises. Once I got a bloody nose, but that was because I was not paying attention. And this is considered acceptable. Cora's voice had climbed into a range that suggested imminent panic. I mean, it builds reflexes, Petra said. And hand-eye coordination. Plus it is fun. Fun. She had just described sustained projectile combat training disguised as recreation. And she thought it was fun. I looked at the medical scanner again, specifically at the section detailing Petra's bone structure. Her skeleton was not just dense, it was reinforced in patterns that suggested evolutionary adaptation to constant impact stress. Her joints showed cartilage development consistent with species that engaged in high-intensity physical activity from early development stages. Every statistic I had recited in that lecture, every number I had read off those slides with bored indifference, suddenly snapped into crystal clear focus. This was what a Class 4 Deathworld produced. This was what happened when you took a species and subjected it to 87 apex predators, sub-freezing winters, blazing summers, 21% oxygen atmosphere, and apparently insane children throwing projectiles at each other for educational purposes. You got Petra Kovac, average human, unremarkable specimen, standard baseline, and she had just caught a plasma bolt with her bare hand. Instructor Krelva, Petra said. Should I return to the observation area? I nodded, not trusting my voice. She walked calmly back to the wall and picked up her datapad like nothing had happened. Venix slowly uncrossed all four of his arms. He looked at Petra, then at me, then back at Petra. I would like to formally apologize for my earlier comments, he said, his voice remarkably steady considering his worldview had just been shattered. I spoke from ignorance. No worries, Petra said, making a note on her datapad. You were not wrong. I am pretty average by human standards. My older brother runs marathons for fun and my sister does competitive rock climbing. They are the athletic ones in the family. The room went silent again. I canceled the rest of the practical exercises. Obviously, you do not continue standard training protocols after a cadet casually demonstrates that your entire understanding of physical limitations is fundamentally flawed. Instead, I dismissed techs to file an incident report with maintenance, sent the weapon to the armory for immediate inspection, and tried to pretend my hands were not shaking. The cadets had not moved. They stood there in a loose semicircle around Petra like she was a piece of unexploded ordnance they were afraid to approach but too fascinated to leave alone. Cora was the first to break the silence. Cadet Kovac, you mentioned your siblings. Are they also enrolled in military programs? Oh no, Petra said, looking up from her datapad. My brother is studying environmental science and my sister is in art school. She does these amazing metal sculptures, really beautiful work. But they are physically capable of. Cora gestured vaguely at the firing zone. That, catching plasma bolts. Petra looked genuinely confused. I mean, probably. We all grew up doing the same activities. Soccer, swimming, tree climbing, bicycle racing. Normal stuff. One of the Yilvan twins made a sound like escaping air. You climb trees. As children, deliberately. Well, yes, Petra said. There was this great oak tree in our neighborhood park with branches perfect for climbing. You could get maybe 10 meters up if you were careful. Sometimes kids would fall, obviously, but usually you just got scraped up or maybe sprained something. Usually, I heard myself say. You usually just got scraped up, right? Petra agreed. I broke my arm once when I was 9, but that was from roller skating, not tree climbing. I missed the dismount off a half pipe and landed wrong. Venix had been listening with all four arms hanging limply at his sides. Now he raised one primary hand tentatively, like a student asking permission to speak. Cadet Kovac, what exactly is roller skating? Oh, you attach wheels to boots and go really fast on pavement, Petra said brightly. There are tricks you can do, like jumps and spins. A half pipe is this curved ramp thing that lets you get airtime. It is great fun until you miscalculate your trajectory. I pulled up my datapad and started typing notes because if I did not document this conversation immediately, Nobody was going to believe it happened. So, human children routinely engage in high-velocity activities with significant fall risk. I would not say routinely, Petra corrected. Some kids prefer low-impact activities like reading or music, but most of us did at least some physical recreation. Builds bone density and muscle development during crucial growth phases. That explained the medical scan results. That explained so much. What about supervision? Cora asked. Surely human parents do not allow their offspring to engage in dangerous activities without safety protocols. Petra laughed. Actually laughed, a short bright sound that made half the cadets flinch. I mean, there are rules. Wear a helmet for biking and skating. Do not climb so high you cannot get down safely. Look both ways before crossing streets. Basic, common sense stuff. Streets, Fennec said faintly. You have to watch for streets. Because of vehicles, Petra explained. Cars, trucks, buses. They move pretty fast and they are much heavier than people, so you definitely want to avoid getting hit by one. We had traffic safety lessons starting in kindergarten. I stopped typing. Petra, how fast do these vehicles move in areas where children are present? School zones are usually 30 kilometers per hour, she said. Regular streets are more like 50 to 60. Highways can be 100 or more, but obviously kids are not walking around on highways. Obviously children were not walking around on highways. What a relief. Herx, the Relian cadet who had been completely silent until now, raised a shaking hand. Instructor Krelva, I would like to formally request a psychological evaluation for symptoms of acute reality dissociation. Denied, I said. If I am having a breakdown, we are all having a breakdown together. Petra was looking at all of us with an expression of growing concern. Did I say something wrong? I feel like maybe Earth is weirder than I realized. Cadet Kovac, I said carefully. You are considered average by human standards. Yes? Maybe slightly below average, she offered. I never made varsity sports teams or anything, pretty middle of the road. And human military specialists, I continued, my voice remarkably steady considering I was having an existential crisis. The ones who volunteer for combat positions, what percentile would they fall into? Petra thought about it. Top 5% maybe. You need really high physical scores, excellent reflexes, strong psychological resilience. The selection process is pretty rigorous. I did some quick mental math. If Petra represented average, and she could catch plasma bolts with her bare hands, what exactly could a top-tier human operator do? Punch through reinforced bulkheads, dodge laser fire, survive hard vacuum? Actually, I did not want to know. I really did not want to know. This explains so much about coalition policy, I muttered, pulling up the restricted species files on my datapad. There were incident reports buried in there, classified documents I had never bothered reading because they seemed irrelevant to my teaching duties. I started reading them now. Human mercenary stops ship boarding action by physically throwing pirates out of an airlock. Human security consultant neutralizes hostage situation by walking through suppressing fire and disarming gunmen with bare hands. Human peacekeeper survives building collapse and digs herself out of rubble after 16 hours. These were not the exceptional cases. These were just the ones that got reported. I looked up at my class. 32 cadets staring at one human exchange student like she had just redefined their understanding of biology. Which, to be fair, she had. Venix stepped forward, and to his credit he actually looked humble. Cadet Kovac, I spoke disrespectfully earlier. I did not understand. Would you be willing to share more about human training methodologies? I think we could all learn from your experience. Petra smiled, a genuine warm expression. Sure, I would be happy to. Fair warning though, a lot of Earth training is pretty boring. Running laps, basic calisthenics, that sort of thing. How many laps? Cora asked. Depends on the day. Maybe 5 to 10 kilometers. The Yilvan twins exchanged glances. That is a warm-up distance, one of them whispered. Yeah, pretty much, Petra agreed. I saved my notes, closed my datapad and made a command decision. Class dismissed. I need to update the curriculum with significantly more detailed warnings. Cadet Kovac, you are coming with me to the administration office. We need to document this incident properly, and also I need you to explain dodgeball in exhaustive detail so I can add it to the threat assessment database.
Dodgeball is in a threat assessment database.
Petra looked pleased. Wait until I tell my mom. She always said gym class would be useful someday. We walked out of the simulation chamber together, leaving 32 cadets behind us having what I suspected would be a very long and deeply philosophical conversation about the nature of Deathworlds and the species they produced. I had been teaching for 17 cycles and I thought I had seen everything. Turns out I had not seen anything yet. 3 days later, I submitted my revised curriculum to the Academy Board with approximately 4,000 words of additional safety warnings, contextual notes and a strongly worded recommendation that all human exchange students receive specialized monitoring during practical exercises. The board approved it without question, probably because they read the incident report and had the same quiet panic attack I had been having on a continuous loop since Tuesday. Petra became something of a legend after that. Cadets who had never spoken to her before suddenly wanted to know everything about Earth. What did humans eat? How did they train? Was it true that human cities were built on top of fault lines and active volcanoes? Petra answered every question with the same patient good humor, completely oblivious to the fact that every casual anecdote about her childhood made her sound like she had been raised in a military boot camp designed by sadists. Venix, to his credit, completely reversed his attitude. He started asking her for combat advice, which she gave free, and I caught them in the training room one afternoon while she explained the concept of parkour. Venix was taking notes, with all 4 hands. I finally understood why the coalition kept humans out of frontline positions. It was not because they were not capable, it was because they were too capable and nobody wanted to deal with the psychological warfare of facing an opponent who had been training for lethal combat since they learned to walk, except they called it playing and thought it was fun. The galaxy had spent 10,000 years categorizing species, analyzing threats, building careful diplomatic frameworks. We had protocols for everything, except we had consistently, catastrophically underestimated what happened when you took a species from a Class 4 Deathworld and gave them access to higher education and modern technology. We made them exponentially more dangerous, and most of them did not even realize it. I ran into Petra in the corridor last week, just before she left for semester break. She was carrying a duffel bag and looked excited about going home. I told my family about the plasma bolt thing, she said cheerfully. My mom laughed and said it sounded like the time my dad caught a wrench that fell off a construction scaffold. My brother said I was showing off. Pretty typical response, honestly. Typical. Catching falling metal tools was typical. Have a safe trip, Cadet Kovacs, I said. Thanks, Instructor Krova. See you next semester. I watched her walk away, the small unassuming human who had fundamentally altered my understanding of biology, physics and threat assessment. Somewhere on Earth, there were 8 billion more just like her, 8 billion apex predators who grew up dodging projectiles, climbing trees, racing on wheels and thinking all of it was completely normal. The galaxy had no idea what was coming. And honestly, neither did I. But I was definitely updating my insurance policy.